You are listening to Think Theory Radio. Radio. Hello and welcome to Think Theory Radio, the show that brings you topics outside the mainstream realm of thought and ideas to make you think. And I am your host, Damian Perdue, your guide on this metaphysical ride through audio delights. And of course, like every week, I'm joined by Paulie C.
Yo, yo, yo.
And today we have a very special guest in studio. Susannah Donne, my friend and radical ecologist.
What's up, my friend?
How are you?
My beautiful neighbor. I'm good. It's good to be here.
Yeah, finally get you on the show. We've been talking about it for a while.
I know.
And
I think the time just is right.
Yes.
You know?
The planets aligned. Mm-hmm. The stars converged.
Mm-hmm. As they do.
And we're here at the luxurious WCPT studios. And basically, you know, we've been talking about having you on the show for a while because I want to get into a discussion about ecology and sustainability and even the more kind of metaphysical sense of our connection to this earth and the, kind of the internet of nature and how we're all connected and what can we do to keep us here.
Right. I have some leads on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say some leads. No guarantees.
Okay.
But, you know, I think what is more interesting is how to be in right relationship with the rest of sentient life on the planet and beyond. So as opposed to the idea of survival, even though I know we're all concerned with that, but more so like what can we do presently?
Yeah.
You know, as opposed to worry too much about the outcome of our behavior.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
So
instead of
that's one way of changing the narrative a little bit.
Right.
You know?
Well, that's kind of always felt like my problem with the whole, like, save the planet kind of thought process. Well, one, I feel like it doesn't hit enough close to home for a lot of people because I feel like people are so disconnected from the planet itself. A lot of people are, that when you hear something like save the planet, they're kind of like, well, I'm trying to save myself. Like, I don't care. But, you know, what does that have to do with me? And they don't realize.
Everything.
Exactly, right.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, like, how disconnected we are, even though I think it's more that people don't realize how connected they are. And they feel disconnected from the planet itself, even though every little thing that we have and that we do comes from Earth. I mean, even when you think about, unfortunately, plastic and everything like this, it still comes from, the petroleum and dead dinosaur bones and, from deep within the earth. So it's something that we rely on so heavily nowadays. And and even though it has a negative impact when you think about the breakdown of it and everything, but it's still something that comes from the earth itself that we use on a day-to-day basis. I don't think people realize. Right.
I think part of the problem right now, at least from my perspective, is that there isn't a lot of accountability or self-agency with regards to material culture. Especially like in westernized or modernized societies. We have very few like craftsmen out here anymore, specifically like the traditional kind, for instance, that would maybe actually go out into nature and split their own wood. And, there's actually no somatic or embodied process of the actual formation of the objects in our lives. And I think that's partly the disconnection. We actually don't have a kind of evolution, like embodied experience with the things that we use and own.
Right.
And so it's really easy for people to just kind of assume that it just popped out of nowhere. I mean, we don't really question a lot of the things we were born into, you know? So like plastic containers, a lot of people just, you know, understandably so, we have a lot of like issues that are more at the forefront of our plate, like that are more local. You know, people have a lot of different humanitarian, social, lots of problems, you know. But yeah, we just don't, we take for granted, I think, where everything comes from. And we definitely have gotten to a point where we're a little bit insane at this point in terms of not regarding that there is a finite amount of quote unquote resources. Even the usage of the word resource is a problem.
Yeah.
Because it's a, you know, there's a certain kind of connotation with it that allows for the concept of the earth being something that we can extract from constantly. So I like to call resources life sources instead. So that's like, it's one of the ways in which I think we can radicalize our thought process is definitely through language. Certainly that can be either a door into, you know, one type of realm of consciousness or another. Right. So a lot of it is shifting the narrative and the language to around things, which is going to happen, I think, naturally as we do have to evolve in order to make an attempt to live in right relationship with all the other life-supporting systems on the planet, right?
Yeah. That's why I feel like, you know, same thing I said, like with saving the planet, same problem that global warming, I feel like, was the worst term to use back when they first came out with that. I think that's why they've steered more towards climate change now, which still is kind of very generic in a way. It doesn't really give you a full grasp on the situation. And I think that global warming was even worse because people were expecting, you know, it's just the planet's going to get hotter and hotter and hotter, but they don't realize that, yes, that's what's happening temperature-wise, but it's going to create extremes of weather. So extreme cold, extreme heat, you know, crazy cyclones, tornadoes, tsunamis, whatever. But it doesn't really give you a full sense of what's happening.
Yeah, definitely does not give justice to what I think is really important, biodiversity. So I think a lot of people don't realize the importance of biodiversity.
Yeah.
You know, when the self-regulating systems of our geological, you know, entity we call Earth are being heavily altered by human activity, not only does the planet warm and climate systems change, but also a lot of life on the planet, insects, all kinds, like pretty much everything, everything that, you know, is alive, plant matter, those are affected as well.
Right.
And a lot of them are facing extinction or threat. And the thing is, if we keep removing basically the scaffolding of the integrity of the planet, it's like removing parts of your own body, right? So it's not just about how's the weather going to affect you. It's about actually amputating parts of the body of the earth. And when you do that, you effectively, you know, can make it, why would you do that? Why would you do that to a perfectly good body?
Right.
I mean, you know, we have a lot of people out here talking now about, you know, carbon sinks and like geoengineering and, you know, a lot of kind of prosthetic ways of replacing what we're destroying.
Yeah.
But I mean, how insane is that, right?
Yeah, and the problem too, I think, is the people that are kind of in charge of that. It's like the same corporations that have been destroying the earth for decades are now the ones that are like, hey, yeah, we're doing carbon capture facilities, and but
They're
it's like
getting
you said,
tax
it's
credits
these
for
getting
it.
tax
But
credits and
you know
creating this
what?
whole new industry.
Yeah, there's some danger in that, with regards to these companies that are getting tax credits, because, for instance, you have like quite a few reforestation projects that are going on, but those companies, so far as I understand, are doing like monoculture reforestation. So, and that is not good, because in a healthy like forest system, you don't have a monoculture of trees. You have lots of different species. You have different generations of species. You have all of these different sort of genetic materials and biodiverse materials that are part of the memory system of the forest, and therefore part of the immune system of the forest. So when you monoculture anything, you kind of, so far as we can tell, especially even with like the way we're doing agriculture for a long time now, it doesn't help anything with regards to the resiliency of the system, of the ecological system. So I just put that out there because reforestation is not simply reforestation. It's like, there are two right ways to do it. And
Yeah.
the way that these bigger companies are doing it for tax credits most of the time, it's like the shortcut way, and the thing is we need that biodiversity and that genetic material, on the planet for its structural integrity. Right. So the thing is, the Earth itself has evolved for a very long time extremely intelligent systems.
Yeah.
And I think it's dangerous for humans to think that we could continue to do what we're doing now and then kind of replace things, because we still don't really even understand hardly how everything works.
Right.
Right.
Well, it's kind of like with
So-
like mycelium. I mean,
Right.
that's something that's kind of just
Just
barely.
now realizing how important it is.
Yeah,
Right?
and it's amazing.
Yeah.
And for people that don't know, mycelium is basically kind of this underground fungal network that connects plants and trees, and it's basically like an internet.
Yes, it's a wood wide web, as
Yeah.
they like to call it, right? So yeah, there's a lot of activity going on underneath the trees. A lot of us, because we don't live underground,
Well,
we
speak for yourself.
Oh,
No, I'm
okay.
just kidding.
right, yeah. Well, underground in what way?
The train tunnels.
Right. I wish I could go under there and see what's going on. It'd be cool, right? Like to be a worm and just be like, "Yo, I'm a worm. Like this is what I see,"
What's like the little ant? Do they still sell those? I'm talking about the little ant farm plastic kind of thing, and you can
Yeah.
watch them go down in there.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a jail.
Kind of wrong,
Yeah,
in
yeah.
my perspective, but I know I sound, I'm extreme. I'm an environmentalist, so your listeners should know that. I have some
Radical
strong feelings
opinions.
about speciesism.
That's
right?
good, though. I mean,
And
we need that.
I would like for people to be more considerate of the other life here.
Well, that's
that
the.
we
I mean, I
share
don't think people
with.
really understand the complexity of nature itself and how many things. We look at insects, and sometimes they're an annoyance or something, and we don't realize what way they tie into the whole ecosystem, and just these little bits of communication, or this one insect eats this plant and then defecates it over here, and that makes this plant grow, and that plant creates oxygen, or what I mean. There's just this. It's so I hate to use the word again, but complex.
I always like to say psychedelic, or like
Psychedelic is good.
I don't mean fractalized like in a dichotomous kind of way, but to me, like nature is kind of like a kaleidoscope, It's like, it's this beautiful, like kind of whole thing that, doesn't really it's the sum of all of its parts, right? And
Right.
we do, especially with insects, we're like so like notoriously like not into insects right now, at least in our culture. I think people are really repulsed by them a lot of the time, and they also feel like, well, they're not conscious, or we have these kind of value judgments and hierarchies that we make with different species on the planet, the humans being at the top and the ones that we can't communicate with at the bottom. And that's one of the ways that we kind of justify, I think, abuse or ill treatment. But you can look at it two ways. You can either kind of value something in and of itself. You can allow for some room there to go like, this thing has value, even though it might not have any use to me. So that's kind of one thing that would be nice if we started doing. But even if you feel the need and it's more comfortable for you to value insects because of their benefit to humans, then there are so many reasons why we need them around, I'm not an entomologist. I'm not, super well versed in that, but they're like any other integral part of, the web of consciousness and, elemental being here. That if we remove the insects, we're pretty screwed.
Yeah. Well, that's what's going on with the bees. Save the bees, man.
Yeah, that's been going on for a while.
Yeah. I know. But even that in itself, you just think, people think that bees, you just see them and you're worried about getting stung or whatever, and don't realize how important they are, and that if there are no bees, like, we literally could lose entire food sources.
Right, because we need the pollinators, and it's not just the bees that are pollinators, but there are a lot of other insects that are pollinators as well as other animals. So, again, you have to make those connections.
Yeah.
So you have to look at more of more of a systems approach to everything, like that. That's
systems theory.
Yeah, applying systems theory to not only human culture, but like human culture, including the rest of any life on the planet, this whole ecological system of which we are part. That's why I like to call nature, again, like psychedelic or like a kaleidoscope, because once you start moving past your first kind of inclination of thought process, and the more you read and the more you listen and the more you observe, that's like really the number one thing too, is like learn for yourself, like open your mind, and just like whatever your first thought is, like maybe step back and question it. And then you might start to realize like there are other things going on, So
I like that psychedelic kaleidoscope.
Yeah, it is though. So.
All right, we got to take a quick break. And if you want to jump in on this conversation, give us a call at 773-763-WCPT. That's 773-763-9278. And we'll be back with more Think Theory Radio right after this. Welcome back to Think Theory Radio. This is Damien, and today I'm joined by special guest, friend, and radical ecologist, Susannah Donne. And we're having a nice conversation about the planet we call Earth, Gaia. And it was James Lovelock, right?
James Lovelock and Lynn Margulies. So the two of them developed that together.
The Gaia theory.
Yes.
And that's basically
they're the credited
Earth as
ones.
kind of a spaceship Earth kind of, and a fusion reactor kind of thing. I don't know how he describes it sometimes. But he just turned 101.
Yeah, happy birthday, James Lovelock.
That's quite an accomplishment.
Yoda. Yeah.
And I know we got some callers, but before that, I have a surprise. Since this is, the show of audio delights, I want to play a clip for you and then see if you can figure out what it is. So
Okay.
play clip one. Now that's psychedelic.
That was beautiful.
And speaking of
Yeah.
psychedelic, can you figure out what that is? Not that I would expect you to, because it's so weird.
Yeah, my first inclination would have been like echolocation with dolphins or something underwater.
It's
or
actually living fungi.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool.
So that
Okay.
was created by musical artist Michael Prime, and he used shiitake mushrooms still attached to their mycelial bodies.
Okay.
And it says that all living organisms produce a faint electrical current.
Ooh, we can talk about this. Yeah,
which-
radionics.
radionics,
okay.
right. Which constantly fluctuates according to the state of the organism. This current can be amplified and used as a control signal for an oscillator, producing a sound which directly reflects the state of the organism.
Yeah, isn't that wild?
Isn't that cool?
Yeah, the subtle energies.
And this
Right.
one he did as an installation. I have seen other I was actually trying to find one. There was a biologist who did it in the woods, like actually like stuck microphones and electrodes down into the ground and recorded the mycelium, the sounds it made. But pretty cool stuff.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was, I had it here. What was it called again? You just said it.
Radionics?
Radionics.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's get to that. But before we get to that, let's go to a caller. Let's take Dave in Hoffman Estates. What's going on, Dave?
Hey, Damien. Hey, Susannah.
Hey, Dave.
I just see a story you all might be interested in, and kind of goes with the topic you were speaking of earlier of the warming and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And under the global news, they have on YouTube, they have a video or whatever of Canada's last intact ice shelf collapses into the sea.
I heard about that. I haven't watched it.
Yeah. They say it's on the YouTube, and then they say under global news, and
Okay.
and they were speaking with some of the people. I just thought you may find that of interest because as you were talking of the climate change, the more politically correct way of calling it now.
Right, right.
Something's obviously warming the waters and stuff like that. And
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. That's been
remember-
happening more and more lately.
yeah, I remember watching. I can't remember the name of the show. I think it was like on HBO or whatever a couple of years ago, and they were up in Iceland, I believe it was, and you could just hear the stuff just breaking off and crashing into the ocean, and they were saying they were going at a much faster rate than they expected, and you could just see like these rivers of melt, ice melt and stuff making crevasses through these ice caps and whatnot, and you looked on the top of it, there was a lot of black material, and they said it wasn't volcanic, that it was more or less man-made stuff that time.
Like oil or something?
Forget the name
Tar?
of the program now, but anyway, well, listen, let me clear off so we can get some of the other callers, but I just thought you might find that interesting about that ice shelf.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Dave. Thanks for the call.
Thank you.
And it's pretty spooky when you see that stuff. It's cool looking, but when you think of the ramifications of what that really implies, it's
Yeah. So I think there's a lot we don't know. From my very rudimentary understanding, people that are studying the Arctic and permafrost and any sort of ice matter melting again, or just beginning to understand what other kind of ecological processes will shift or be affected, or,
What kind of ancient viruses will be released?
Yeah, there are. I mean, there's definitely, there's concerns about methane being, like ancient methane being
Right.
locked in there. And, that's
I've heard about that, like in Siberia, because a lot of the permafrost is melting, and there's huge pockets of methane
right.
underneath. And I think one of them, they were thinking it could be like worse than the burning of the rainforest in Brazil that was going on this year.
Recently, yeah.
That this like methane pocket could have even worse effect than that whole rainforest burning. So
Yeah, we've got a lot of hypotheses and a lot of different scientific tools for measuring, possible chaos or lack thereof. So I think, that's a fact. I think what I'm trying to express is to kind of move away from the narrative of doom with global warming. Because I don't think it's effective for humans.
Yeah.
I'm not at all. I mean, I definitely believe in climate science. I also believe that we live in an age of hyper information.
Yeah.
And we have so many instruments of measurement these days, right? And I'm pretty fascinated actually by how obsessed we are with measuring things as opposed to not really putting on any attention towards the psychological and cultural dispositions that have allowed for ecological crisis to begin with. So, and I think that, I don't even like to call it crisis, because I think, the planet has always gone through changes.
right.
It always will, whether, at any given point in time while humans are here, before they were here, after, we're gone, if that happens. So I think what's more interesting is to maybe think about, I don't know, think about the ways in which human culture could shift because of the physical changes that we may see in our lifetime. And then like, what can we do to like harness that and kind of get creative with it? And I know it's alarming to see the videos, and I think one of the reasons we see them more often is because, again, we have all these recording devices out here, and it's important that, we have the volume turned up on everything,
Right.
on this stuff. But I just want to express what I know a little bit about, the science of melting ice, is that we're still trying to figure a lot out. Certainly we're concerned about the methane, and, there have been, thoughts put out there about possibly ancient, viruses. But again, we have, it's like we have a real obsession with predicting what could go wrong. And I think the emphasis should be put more on how do we change what do we do with ourselves? What are we doing wrong? What can we change as people, as a planetary consciousness, as nations, as communities, to start a different story, right?
Yeah, I wonder where the
Because
whole
of-
doomsday kind of, because that's it
Right.
seems to be like, even in ancient cultures, because I would want to just blame it on religion, but I think even before that, there's always, it seems like every culture has some kind of like doomsday prophecy, and I think that we feed into that kind of fear of, like what you were just saying, what can go wrong instead of focusing on what
can
can
go
we
right.
do right.
Yeah. I think there's a little too much and again, it isn't like a healthy way to address a conflict. I think it might be a default way. I'm not saying that that's our default, way as human species. It's just that right now in our dominant narrative in our culture, that seems, look at the news. It's like, it's always like sensationalist, like even BBC, like that's one of my
fear
main,
porn.
it is fear porn and they like to turn the volume up on drama. And again, I am not discounting at all the science behind climate change. I just think the way in which it's presented sometimes isn't conducive to, getting things done, or even examining ourselves.
Coming up with solutions. And
Yeah.
No,
So
I think
there's
you're right.
a lot we don't know, and
And speaking of this, we have a caller, Randy from the north side. They wanted to talk about global habitat destruction. What's going on, Randy?
Hey, how are you doing, Damien?
Good.
Hey, you were talking about comparing with your guests the terms climate change and global warming. And quite frankly, I think climate change is about the worst possible term that could ever be used of what's going on now. It's too passive. Because people can say, well, the seasons change. Global warming isn't a great term unless you understand the effect, the result of global warming.
Right.
It's really what's going on, and I have to kind of slightly disagree. We are in a crisis. The methane is just one little issue, but really, look at all the hurricane activity on the East Coast. It is making almost living on the coast, I could foresee it 50 years in the future, unlivable. Look at places like Bangladesh, which is like below sea level. That country could be destroyed.
Yeah.
The reason we're and I'll end up with this because I don't want to yammer on, but I think we haven't, because nothing is being done by adopting global the term climate change. In fact, the people we elect are just blowing it off. They're just saying, oh, they're just a bunch of tree huggers. And I don't see, speaking of bees and butterflies, I'm 64 years old. When I was young, they were all over the place. And we need these insects just in the food cycle. I think we are too passive about the real problem. We need to be a lot more firm that it is in a crisis, because at some point in time, the global warming and is going to be self-sustaining, and it's the planet. Large portions of the planet will be unlivable. That's kind of what I think.
Yeah, no, I hear you, Randy. Now, let me ask before you go, do you have a term that you've thought of that might be better to use than climate change or global warming?
Well, clearly global habitat destruction isn't the best term, but I think we need some type of term that where the global warming is causing unlivability, and it is a self-sustaining. We need to find a much more
less benign term, right? Yeah,
because the average people, that don't read or just aren't really engaged in it, they're just saying, "Oh, shrug it." But I end with saying I was reading I think it was the New York Times, and they had a picture of this farmer looking over his land, and the caption says, "Well, 2 years ago, because of the droughts, he had to go take a job and he gave up farming." And the panorama, it looked like he had a couple, I would say, I only can guess, a couple hundred acres, and you saw a farmer in boots and all that. And that image represented to me, this is a crisis, because the droughts are affecting potentially large food supplies. And it concerns me, even though I'm I may be older than you. I don't know how old you are, but it does concern
I'm
me
not telling.
because, okay, because, who gets screwed? It's
The kids.
the common people and the people who are poor and the people who are disadvantaged and that they can't even eat.
Yeah.
You need a lot of water for rice, for out in the Far East, in China, all that. I mean, you can't have and half the world survives on rice, or I don't know. I'm kind of exaggerating there. I apologize, but I'm saying.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
My point is this is a big deal that we are blowing off.
Yeah.
And we have elected officials who are just saying, well, I don't want to affect my rich billionaire's bottom line, and so I'm just going to destroy all the EPA laws and all the environmental laws. And the Clean Water Act made our water supplies much better. Not like when Lake Erie was just a bunch of poison bull.
Right.
So anyway, I know I'm getting really emotional about, but we need, and you don't have to. I'm not really an environmentalist. It's just practical. When a farmer gives up farming because of the droughts, and look at California and the West, they're having all these wildfires. It's an example of global habitat destruction. Look, all those people probably, many of them will have to go bankrupt because they lost their homes. Whatever.
Yeah.
But, it's a big issue, and I'm glad you're talking about it. And
Yeah. Hey, Randy.
Anyway.
No, thanks for the call, Randy, and great points. And you made me think of a couple different things, like environmental racism is huge. People don't understand how that works. And also, when you talked about rice, I want to get into that, but we got to take a break. So when we come back, we'll have more of this great discussion right here on Think Theory Radio. Give us a call at 773-763-9278. That's 773-763-WCPT, and we'll be back in just a minute. Welcome back to Think Theory Radio. This is Damien, and I'm joined by Susannah Donne, radical ecologist, horticulturalist, florist, many jack of all trades in the plant realm.
The plant realm, yes, the botanical plant realm.
And very knowledgeable about the system we call Earth and how everything is connected and related and what we need to do to keep it that way, right?
Yeah.
And Randy, great call right before the break, brought up some things that made me think. He was mentioning how half the world eats rice, and I told him during the break, but I had met a woman in Malta one time who was volunteering with Doctors Without Borders, and she was telling me how when she was in Africa and how these people were, consuming so much rice, but that it actually wasn't needed, and that they actually had the land that they could use to grow actual plants and vegetables that were, indigenous to that area, but because of the mentality in the society, this kind of third world thinking and what needs to be done, that they're kind of being forced to eat a lot of this rice, and it's become like this whole industry, because that's money and people are growing it. And it was really deep how complex it is, and where it really goes, and do we really need that? It's like you think people need something and they don't really need it. It's kind of like those Tom shoes where we buy a pair of shoes and we give a pair of shoes to kids in Africa, and it's like, but that's actually hurting the kids in Africa. It's actually hurting the economy there, because they have shoemakers. They have people there that make shoes, and when you give people free shoes, they're not buying the shoes from the guy down the block, and it's kind of messing up their economy. But then you brought up liberation ecology.
Right.
And so I want to know more about that.
Yeah. So, so within the world of sustainability, or, eco-psychology, which is the learning discipline I just came out of, there's one theme of many is this thing called bioregionalism, and it refers specifically to building up communities and societies, and especially economies, based on more heavily, at least at this point, on what is locally possible and good for the regional ecosystem, but also what you could do to localize economies, right? Because right now, the modern world is pretty much reliant upon a transnational consumerist system.
Yes.
And it's not like anyone out here is advocating for just forget we had the spice trade, and let's not do any trade with each other, and let's not share stuff and ideas, and that's not what we're talking about. It's just that things are pretty crazy at this point. We're at a point where we're actually flying bees across continents to pollinate things.
Well, they're actually working on robotic bees.
Yes, they are. Yeah.
Which is insane.
It is insane.
It's cool.
I mean, it's cool,
insane.
But again, it's one of those things that's why are we spending our time fixing things that shouldn't have been broken to begin with? But so with bioregionalism, the idea is that, instead of the whole entire planet continuing to try to aspire to the standards of living that we currently have in the Western modern, dominant culture that is very heavily reliant upon transnational trade, it kind of gets back to what I was saying earlier, with regards to us not having any accountability or agency, because we really do have very few people here in this country who would know how to survive in their own locale alone, right?
Totally.
And that's I think it's kind of sad, that, and the other thing is that it really takes us away from relationship with the natural world.
Yeah.
We don't have to have that because we're flying so many different products and things across nations, and we have all these silly, weird, ideas yeah, buy Tom's shoes and let's put them over there. And, I've been over there for a long amount of time, and I saw piles of shoes, being sold by people for a equivalent of $1. And it's people don't realize what they're doing, but then you have a lot of people who are they have no other source of income. So, but the thing is, it's not being, local economies are not being facilitated by some of these projects that we have out here that are supposed to be helping things.
Right.
But just getting back to bioregionalism, the idea is that what we start to do instead is build up local economies instead of transnational economies. It doesn't mean you get rid of transnational economies altogether, but you scale back on them, and obviously that takes a conversion, but that way you're securing, you're removing a lot of elements between the people and the land. It really makes for probably a more secure society when people are able to, kind of access things within their own community, regional area. It just makes more sense,
simplistic buy local, basically.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, why are we shipping? Why are we doing that? It's so dumb, So there's that, but then this idea of liberation ecology it's a less benign form to me of bioregionalism, because it gets into the idea that you do have a lot of people out here who are just, wow, there's an echo in here, so I'm gonna.
Oh, you could take them off.
I was like, what?
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember seeing a special when I was talking about the fishing industry in parts of Africa and how that was destroying, just the connection of the ecological system, and how, because these I forget which kind of animals, but they that would normally eat the fish weren't getting access to the fish, so they were dying off. These animals were typically eaten by lions, so the lions are dying off. Now, the lions used to keep the baboons in check. So since the lions are dying off, baboon population has exploded. Now the baboons go in and they're kind of aggressive and they can destroy whole like fields of crops. And this is actually then the people who, farming are taking their kids out of school so that they can basically be security for the crops to keep the baboons away. And it's this whole thing, like just from the fishing industry. But you have so many people there that are convinced, well, I don't have any money. It's, it's kind of like either this or piracy. It's just, it's amazing. But like to what you were saying though.
Well, it is possible that we could bring up more people on the planet if we, if we gave them more access to their regions, and more relationship with their natural, capacities in their regions, instead of going in there and like blowing up mines and putting in some sort of industry that's like a global industry, you kind of localize industry instead, and that way you kind of you take people off of the worldwide like system of domination, right? Which is, I think, partly what really needs to happen for the system, too, because I don't think a healthy system is composed of a bunch of people who have no other choice. Yeah. And who have nothing built into their culture. And I'm talking about Americans as well. Like, what would we do if we could not ship things over here anymore? You know what I mean? We don't have a lot of self-reliance. Right. And I think that's a mistake to remove from any community,
Yeah, that's why I'm really happy to see these kind of inner city farms that have been starting. And you just think about even like farmers markets, which wasn't really a thing that long ago. And now I know it's kind of trendy or whatever, but it still has an impact, I feel like, of what you're saying, is bringing back the necessity of kind of eliminating the transnational thing. Because there's so many products like that where, you think of Illinois and there's plenty of farmland, but yet we're getting, romaine lettuce shipped in from California or wherever else. And why are we shipping this all the way in from there when we can grow it here? And, I think that it's good to see at least there's a little bit of change starting with these local farms. And
yeah, and the other thing is that if we keep removing local ecosystems just so that we can replace them with like for instance, we have all these old growth forests that are removed for cattle farming, like in the Amazon. And so what sense does that make? Right. We can go on and on about that.
Oh, I know.
We're not maximizing like the capacities for partnership between humans and nature at all. We're just leveling things and then like putting in monocultures all over the world. And when you put in monocultures on like an ecological level, you also start to see, I think, more homogeny in people, which I think could be a sad thing as well, because we have all evolved our own like beautiful cultures for the most part because we were tied to close relationship with our landscapes and everything around them,
Well, this has been an awesome discussion. Unfortunately,
are we done?
The hour, it goes by so fast. I'm bringing you back on again for sure, because we have barely scratched the surface of all of this. And I want to thank you so much for coming on, Susannah. And I apologize to the callers. I know we had a couple that were on hold, but we just couldn't get to you because unfortunately I only get an hour. So write to management. Let them know you want Think Theory Radio 2 hours. And thanks again to the callers and everyone for listening. We'll be back again next week.